The first thing I remember is cold. Not the type of cold you describe with a shiver or a hiss through clenched teeth, but the kind that wraps around bone and thought alike. The kind that convinces you silence is safety. That maybe, just maybe, if you breathe a little quieter, it won't notice you're still alive. My skin was bare, pale against the frost-coated rocks. My eyes blinked against a sky I did not recognize. No stars, no suns, just a blank, clouded vault stretching in every direction, as if the world itself had turned its face away. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes, hours. It didn't matter. Time had no meaning. My people were gun-ripped from the transport mid-jump by a gravitational anomaly the humans called a rift shear. One by one, their life signs winked out on my console until only mine remained. That console had long since been reduced to slag and ash. I had followed shortly after. I wasn't supposed to survive, yet I did. My kind are not built for harsh environments. We're grace, not grit, symbiotic elegance, not solitary endurance. And yet there I was, knees scraped, breath rattling, voice torn to whispers I could no longer hear. Then I saw him, a dark silhouette at first, outlined by the dim blue haze rising from the ground behind him. I thought he was another hallucination, the kind that danced just before the body gave in to hypothermia, the kind that promised comfort but never came close enough to touch. But he did. Boots crunched against the frost, heavy fabric swayed with each step, his breath steamed in clouds before his face. His eyes were human green, tired, scanning, but when they found mine, they softened, and something inside me twisted. He didn't speak right away. He just knelt beside me, his large gloved hands hovering above my shoulders, as if he wasn't sure I was real. Then, softly, "Hey, you're not alone." I blinked, barely able to move my lips. My throat burned. No words came out, just a weak rasp that might have been a sob, or a laugh, or a plea. He didn't need me to speak. He'd already shrugged off his thick outer coat and wrapped it around my trembling frame before I could even register the motion. The warmth shocked me. It felt foreign, sinful, almost, like I didn't deserve it. And then he touched my face, not roughly, not in pity, just the barest brush of his fingers, calloused and shaking themselves from cold. His skin met mine, and my kind sensitive to touch, to empathy, felt something raw and terrifying pass between us. Connection, not like our biolinks, not synthetic bonding. This was something else, older, simpler, realer. I looked at him, and he looked at me like I was something he didn't expect to still be breathing, but he was glad I was. He whispered, "You'll never be alone again," and something inside me shattered. I don't remember the journey from that ridge to the shelter he'd carved into the cave mouth, but I remember the fire. I remember its light flickering across the stone walls, the way it cast moving shadows across his face while he prepared a nutrient pack and awkwardly tried to make me eat. I remember the silence between us, not uncomfortable, but reverent, as if he understood I didn't need words yet, as if he knew how fragile I was and how easily I might still disappear. He told me his name eventually, Jonah, simple, unremarkable, and yet, when he said it, it felt like a tether anchoring me back to existence. "Jonah," I repeated, mouth unsure around the syllables. My voice was a croak, but he smiled anyway. "That's it," he said gently. "Still got some fight in you." I didn't. Not really. But I clung to his presence like it could substitute for will. Over the next few days, he never left. Not even when I was sleeping, sweating through the sickness and frostbite that should have killed me. I'd wake to his humming. Human melodies, wordless, sad, beautiful, in a broken sort of way. Eventually, I asked him why he stayed. He shrugged. "You looked like you needed someone." I wanted to scream. "You don't understand. My species doesn't bond like yours. We are collective minds. We don't need someone. We need everyone." and I had lost everyone. But I didn't scream. I just nodded, because in that moment, his presence was enough. He talked about Earth sometimes, not the Earth from your history files or science briefings. His Earth, the little corner he came from, the rust-red soil of Oklahoma, the way the rain smelled after dust storms, his mother's laugh, the dogs, the wheat fields that stretched beyond what eyes could see. He said things like, "If we get off this rock, I'll take you there. You'd like the stars. They don't crowd each other there." I didn't understand the metaphor, but it sounded kind. One night, I broke down. Memories came flooding back of my sister's laughter, of the way my people sang together during planetary ascents. The last song I heard before the rupture took them. I wept. I shook. I screamed into the cave wall until my voice was blood and ash. He didn't speak. He didn't touch me. He just sat there, quiet, present, human. That was when I knew the truth. Humans are not strong because of their machines, their weapons, or their endless stubborn wars. They are strong because when one of them says, "I'm not leaving," they mean it. He could have left me to die. The rescue beacon he'd set up was small, barely enough energy for a short burst. He could have rationed it, sent it with a signal just for him. But instead, he coded the message to read, to survivors. She's not from Earth, but she's not alone anymore. The day the retrieval ship came, I almost didn't board. I was afraid that outside the cold and the cave and the firelight, whatever we had would vanish. That he'd go back to Earth, and I'd go back to a refugee camp of the forgotten. Afraid the silence between us had been temporary, a byproduct of shared trauma. He saw it in my eyes, and he held out his hand. "Wherever you go, I go." Just 5 words. I took his hand, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I believed them. They assigned me to Habitat Sector Delta 4 after rehabilitation. A temporary placement, they said. Clean walls. Artificial sunlight that always felt a little too golden. The scent of sterilized wood, synthetic earth air, recycled more times than I wanted to count. But I didn't complain. I was out of quarantine. I was alive. And somewhere beyond the walls and protocols, Jonah was still out there. We weren't allowed to contact each other directly. Something about emotional dependency. Across species lines and intercultural sensitivity regulations. I didn't care. Neither did he. I found the notes, slipped under doors, hidden in food trays, tucked inside data slates. He always signed them the same way. "Still with you, Jay." One day I found a scrap of old plastipaper, handwritten again. It wasn't a note. It was a poem. Some stars are born in silence. Others are forged in screams. But the brightest ones never forget how dark it used to be. I traced every letter with shaking fingers. That day, I didn't attend group therapy. I walked instead, alone, through quiet halls, echoing with the faint hum of the station's core. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what was lost. Survivors. Cradling relics, hollow faces glancing up only to retreat again into themselves. The station was a monument to aftermath, and still, somehow, hope lingered like a stubborn weed. A few days later, I found a terminal unlocked just long enough to catch the movement logs of personnel. I wasn't a slicer, but I didn't need to be. Jonah's ID code still burned in my memory. When I typed it, a list came up. Assigned, Diplomatic Outreach Initiative. Section, Terraforming Aid. Location, Outer Rings. Earthward Station 9. It meant nothing to me until I saw the timestamp. He was still here, still close. I ran. I didn't care about rules or forms or artificial lighting pretending to be warmth. I sprinted through corridors, breath raw, steps pounding like thunder through the steel veins of the station. I found Earthward 9's transit dock just before shift change. Uniforms moved in clusters. Voices echoed in 17 languages. Then I saw him, hair longer, face more tired. But the moment his eyes found mine, everything else disappeared. He didn't smile this time. He ran to me. We didn't speak at first. We just held each other, tight, like we were bracing against a new kind of storm. The kind that comes after the wreckage, when you start to build again and realize how much was really broken. I thought they transferred you off station, I said into his chest. They tried, he whispered. I said no. Why? He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Because I made a promise. And there it was again, that quiet certainty, that immovable, ridiculous, miraculous faith he carried in every step. Jonah didn't promise lightly. When he said something, he meant it with every molecule in his strange human body. He smuggled me into a low-traffic hydroponics bay, deep beneath the administrative decks. It wasn't technically off limits, but it wasn't approved either. There, under real plants and filtered light, he laid out a blanket and handed me a warm flask. It's not much, he said, but it smells like cinnamon. Thought you might like that. I did. We talked for hours, about nothing, about everything, about the future, about the past. He told me Earth's moon used to be worshipped as a goddess. I told him my people believed the stars were the dreams of the dead. He laughed. I cried. We sat in silence, and it was enough. That's when I knew I loved him. Not the way my kind understands love. Not the way we bond in neural convergence and ceremonial song. This was something smaller and fiercer. A quiet flame instead of a chorus. A shelter instead of a celebration. I think I'm broken, I told him. I'm not what I was. He took my hands in his, calloused fingers against scarred skin. Then we'll rebuild, he said, piece by piece. He kept finding ways to see me. Sometimes he wore a maintenance uniform. Sometimes he pretended to deliver food. Once, he just climbed through a ventilation shaft and dropped into my room like a lunatic. I brought cookies, he said, like it was the most normal thing in the galaxy. They were terrible, crumbly and stale. I ate every one. But word spread, whispers, rumors, protocol violations. One night, I was summoned to the administrator's office. They didn't scold me. They didn't raise their voices. They just looked tired. He's not your keeper, one of them said. You need to learn to exist on your own. I don't need him to survive, I answered. I need him to live. The word surprised even me, but they didn't back down. They called it unhealthy attachment. They used terms like psychosocial rebound and trauma imprinting. They said I'd be transferred to another facility, another station, another system. I went back to my room. I didn't cry. I left a note in the vent. They're moving me. I don't know where, but I'll find you again. I swear it. I waited. Hours passed. Then, just before lights out, I heard the softest sound, metal shifting, and then a whisper. Pack your things. Jonah had a plan. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was illegal. It was human. He'd forged a transport ID, rerouted my clearance, swapped my biometric record with a diplomat's pet, archivist drone. We boarded the shuttle at 0300. No alarms. No questions. Just stars. As the station disappeared behind us, I sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring into the void. He reached over and took my hand. You okay? I looked at him, at the man who had walked through frost, fire, and bureaucracy, just to keep a promise. I am now. We didn't know where we were going, didn't care, because for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, we weren't surviving. We were choosing, together. We didn't sleep much the first 3 nights after leaving the station. The transport ship was small, an old solar skipper, meant for short orbital runs, not long-distance escape. It creaked with every maneuver, systems wind under strain, and the onboard AI barely spoke more than a line of diagnostic readouts. But it was ours. Jonah rigged a secondary power loop from the coolant system. just enough to keep the nav console from blacking out during hyperpulses. I patched COM wiring with melted nutrient tubing. We made it work. There was no plan beyond movement. We didn't have clearance. We didn't have docking rights. We didn't have friends. But what we did have was a quiet belief that the stars were better than the walls we'd left behind. We drifted through the edge of Centauri traffic lanes for a week, then veered off toward the free colonies, a tangle of barely governed mining stations, merchant hubs, and ghost towns scattered like breadcrumbs across the black dot. It was in the shadow of an old refueling ring abandoned and listing against a gas giant's pull that we finally stopped. "We need rest," Jonah said. "Real rest." The ring still had power. Emergency systems only, but enough. We found a hab pod in the upper deck, walls cracked from neglect, floor covered in dust. That tasted like metal and memory. He rigged a heater. I cleaned out the air ducts. We cooked ration paste over a portable plasma coil and pretended it was stew. We didn't talk about the Pia station. We didn't talk about what we'd left behind. But the silence between us was warm. One night, I woke to find Jonah sitting cross-legged in front of a viewport, staring out at the gas giant's endless storm. Lightning coiled through the clouds like veins. He didn't move when I approached, just patted the floor beside him. "I used to think space would feel bigger," he said. "It doesn't. It does, but not in the way I thought. It's not the size, it's the emptiness. All that nothing pressing in from every direction. You start to wonder if anything you do actually matters." I didn't respond. I just took his hand and pressed it to my chest. He looked at me, really looked, and whispered, "But you do." There were no rules anymore, no directives, no protocols about emotional entanglement or species interaction. There was only time, and what we did with it. We started building something, not just a life, something deeper. We mapped scavenger routes, repaired old relay buoys. Jonah even repurposed our distress beacon into a wideband scanner, pinging nearby ships not for help, but for stories. He wanted to hear what the rest of the galaxy was saying, so we listened. 2 poets on mining barges, 2 revolutionaries broadcasting from moon craters, 2 lost souls whispering coordinates in case someone was still listening. It became a ritual. Every night, we'd sit by the transmitter and let the signals pour in. It made the void feel less empty, but peace is never permanent. It started with a silent ping from a passing drone, a data packet embedded in a carrier signal. We ignored it at first. Then another came, then a third, each one getting closer, tighter, harder to dismiss. "They're looking for us," Jonah said, scanning the metadata. "They asked." He didn't answer, just stared at the readout. The packet bore the signature of an intersystem, security arm, human and allied species both. And they weren't broadcasting for help. They were broadcasting for capture. "Code Black Directive," Jonah muttered. "Unlawful, exfil, cross-species breach. They've flagged you, me." He nodded. "They think I took you. You didn't. Doesn't matter." We had 32 hours before their patrols reached the outer orbit of the gas giant. That's all the time we had left before we'd be seen, logged, tracked, and possibly separated forever. "We have to move," he said. "But where?" He looked at me then, eyes tired, voice quiet. "Somewhere they won't follow." There was only one place that fit that description: Earth. It was a gamble, a stupid one. Earth was dense, monitored, layered in orbital bureaucracy and ancient fears. My kind hadn't been there since the pre-amnesty wars, but Jonah swore we'd be safe. "I know someone," he said, "an old friend. She owes me." I didn't ask why, didn't need to. He had that look again, the one he wore in the snow, in the cave, on the station floor. The look that said, "I'll get you through this, or die trying." We rerouted power, burned every backup cell, skipped meals, slept in shifts, calculated jumps through unstable lanes that hadn't been logged in decades. It was hell, But we made it. We broke orbit above Earth's southern hemisphere, cloaked beneath a civilian logistics drop. The planet stretched beneath us, blue and green and cracked with the scars of old wars. But beautiful. It wasn't like the pictures. It was better. We landed near the equatorial divide where jungle met tech, and slums hugged the edges of shining towers. Jonah led me through the city like he'd never left. People stared, some in confusion, some in fear, some in awe. No one stopped us. We reached an old tenement on the edge of an algae farm. Inside, we found her tall, dark skin, one arm replaced, with chrome, eyes like polished steel. "Jonah," she said flatly, "you have some nerve." He smiled. "Still owe me a favor." She looked at me. Her gaze was piercing, calculating. Then, to my surprise, it softened. "You brought her here." He nodded. "I had nowhere else." She studied me a moment longer. Then she stepped aside. "Then this is somewhere now." Her name was Vega, and her home became ours. For a while, we stayed hidden. We worked odd jobs. Jonah taught locals how to reroute water lines. I helped process language files for translation AI. We kept our heads down, but at night we dreamed of a place, just ours, a ship of our own, a station, maybe, far from borders and scanners and rules, a home, and one night. As the rain poured down and the old tenement groaned under the weight of time, he turned to me. "Would you stay, if I built it?" "What?" "That place, that home. Would you stay?" I didn't hesitate. "I already have." And he kissed me, soft, fierce, human, and I kissed him back. The cold wasn't just on her skin anymore. It had seeped into her bones, her breath, the hollow ache in her chest that pulsed with every step. The ice beneath her feet no longer stunk. It welcomed her like an old enemy offering a slow surrender. The wind whispered nothingness through the valley, carving through the silent, silver-white world around her, and above. The clouds pressed down like a lid, sealing her in a coffin of snow, and yet she walked, for hours. Or dice it, was impossible to tell. Her legs carried her forward without will, without thought, just the echo of movement, as if her body remembered something her mind had forgotten. She wasn't sure when she had stopped crying. Maybe it had frozen to her cheeks. Maybe it had simply dried up with everything else inside her. But somewhere deep beneath the numbing silence, she still heard his voice. "You'll never be alone again." 3 days had passed since she'd seen him. 3 days since the human Jace had stood between her and death and mate. A promise no one in the galaxy had ever dared make to her kind. She'd begged him not to follow, not to get involved, not to risk his people. He'd ignored her, of course. He had. Humans were reckless, relentlessly loyal, bound not by blood or code or species, but something older, something deeper. They didn't love because it was logical. They loved because they chose to, and that terrified the ones who ruled this galaxy. She reached the ridge at dusk. Below, spread out in the valley, was the facility. A military-grade dome, surrounded by plasma fencing and humming surveillance towers, nestled like a tumor in the snow-covered spine of the northern mountains. It had once been a research station, then a detention center, then a place for cleansing, their word for erasure. No graves, no records, just vanishing. And it was where they took the ones like her, half human, half experiment, too alien for humans, too human for aliens, created, discarded, hunted. She sank to her knees in the snow and stared down at the place that had shattered her first life. She didn't come to forgive or forget. She came to finish it. There was movement to her left, no sound, just the faint shimmer of breath in the air. Her head whipped toward it, instinct returning faster than thought, and she reached for the knife at her boot before the figure raised both hands slowly. "It's me," Jace said quietly, eyes scanning the horizon. "You're early." She didn't move. He knelt beside her without waiting for permission, his warmth radiating like a furnace in the cold. His coat was thick, matte black, too big for stealth, and still dusted with the ice of the hike. But his eyes, those damn eyes, burned with focus, with intent, with something that hadn't dimmed even after all they'd seen. "You followed me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You led me. I told you not to. You didn't mean it." A gust of wind swept between them, biting and sharp. He didn't flinch. "I would have burned the whole damn planet to find you," he said. "But you left a trail, on purpose." "No," he smirked. "You just always leave footprints like you're trying to stomp out the stars." A laugh escaped her throat before she could stop it. It hurt, but it was real. She turned back to the valley. That place. It killed people like me. I know. They'll be waiting. Armed. Genetically enhanced. No mercy. He nodded, and she looked at him, really looked at him, the stubble on his chin, the cut on his brow, the stubbornness in his jaw that had gotten him into more trouble than 1,000 weapons ever could. "You shouldn't be here," she said. He leaned forward until his forehead touched hers. "Neither should you." The first explosion came at dawn. She triggered it, remotely, one of the mines she'd planted in the glacier tunnels a week before. A decoy. The guards scrambled out of the dome, disoriented, flanking too wide. That was their first mistake. The second explosion dropped a guard tower. That was Jace's touch. Tactical, efficient, and loud. The tower collapsed like a kicked toy, sending a surge of panic through the security channels, and then they moved. She slipped through the ice vent, near the dome's eastern wall, using the blind spot between two surveillance cycles. Jace covered her from above, high in the rocks, sniper scope glinting just once before vanishing again. Inside, the air stank of chemicals and sterilized pain. She remembered the corridors, the red lights, the silence between screams. She remembered running and never getting far. But now, she wasn't running. Now, she was hunting. The first guard she met didn't even see her coming. One silent step, one flash of metal. He collapsed without a sound. She dragged him into a side chamber and moved on, through the east wing, down the cell corridor, past the doors marked Xenovi and Subject No. She stopped at one cell. The window was sealed, frosted over, but she felt it. The presence inside, the rhythm of shallow breathing, the fragile pulse of life that hadn't been extinguished yet. She broke the seal. Inside, a girl not older than 13, curled in a corner, eyes wide and wild. Her skin shimmered faintly with bioengineered adaptation, scales meant to regulate heat in extreme conditions. An experiment. Like her. The girl looked up, flinched, but then her eyes locked on the figure behind her. "It's okay," the woman whispered. "You're not alone." She wrapped the girl in her coat and lifted her up. The girl clung to her, weightless and trembling. Over the intercom, alarms wailed. Jace's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Extraction in 3. You good?" "Package secured," she replied, breath misting. "Meet at West Tunnel." The next 5 minutes blurred into chaos. Guards everywhere. Automated drones descending. Sirens screaming. Jace met her at the airlock, rifle slung, arm bleeding from a graze. He took one look at the girl and nodded. No words. No time. They ran through the access tunnel, over the ridge, into the whiteout windstorm that was both camouflage and curse. Behind them, the facility began to self-purchase standard protocol. When containment was breached, explosions thundered behind their footsteps. Fire met frost. They didn't stop until the trees swallowed them, until the only sound left was the ragged breath of the child in her arms, and Jace's voice, steady, anchoring. Later, by the fire, the girl finally spoke. "What happens now?" The woman looked at Jace. He looked at her. "You heal," she said. "You live. And when they come again?" the girl asked. Jace leaned forward, his voice like gravel and warmth all at once. "Then they'll meet all of us." The child looked between them, unsure, but she saw something she didn't understand, yet something she felt. A bond, not of species, not of blood, but of choice. She would never be alone again, and neither would they. They came back. We had barely begun to build something like safety when the sky lit up again, not with thunder, not with hope, but with the silver gleam of returning ships, sleek and cold, like surgical knives descending through cloud. I stood outside the shelter we'd cobbled together from broken steel and plastic sheeting, clutching the edge of the blanket he'd wrapped around me. It still carried his scent, still smelled like safety, but there was no safety left now. He stood at the edge of the bluff, rifle in hand, shoulders squared. Others had gathered, our small, ragged crew of survivors, humans and aliens both, beaten but breathing. The wind howled through the valley, and for the first time since that night, he'd found me. I felt the cold again. He turned to me. Just one glance, that was all I needed. I had thought I'd lost everything, my home world, my people, my sense of self. But in that glance, I remembered what I had now. Not a species, not a title, not even a name that meant anything anymore. But I had him, and I would not let them take him. The first blasts came from the sky, searing hot, plasma pure, vaporizing the tree line with arrogant ease. But humans had learned. Oh, how they'd learned. Traps buried deep in the soil snapped like jaws. EMP pulses danced like lightning across the hills, and when the first drop pod hit the ground with that high-pitched whine, humans were already there, waiting. He didn't say a word when the fighting started. He didn't need to. I was supposed to stay back, to hide. That's what he told me. But I'd hidden enough for one lifetime. I picked up the small sidearm he'd left behind, hands trembling, and followed the fire. Smoke blurred the lines between enemies and friends. Screams cut through the haze, guttural, alien and human both. I saw one of them, tall, glistening, insectal, charging at a boy who couldn't have been more than 15. My legs moved before I could think. The gun kicked in my hand. Once. Twice, it fell. The boy looked at me like I was something more than just another survivor. Like I was one of them now. By the time I found him again, his shoulder was slick with blood. His gun was empty, but his eyes were bright. Alive. You shouldn't be here, he said, breath ragged. I pressed my forehead to his and whispered back, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. The fighting dragged on. Hours, maybe days. Time didn't exist anymore. Not in war. Not in survival. When it finally stopped, when the last of the invaders fled back into the sky, leaving behind only wreckage and silence, I collapsed beside him in the mud. Neither of us could move, but both of us were smiling. The others began to gather. Survivors, like us. Dozens, then hundreds. Some scarred, some broken, but all alive. And more than that, dashed together. In the days that followed, we began to rebuild. Proper shelters, shared meals, watch rotations. We even laughed sometimes. He taught the young ones how to disassemble weapons, how to move without being seen. I taught them how to speak my native tongue, how to spot the signs of sickness, how to read the wind. One night, as the sun dipped low, he found me sitting by the edge of the ravine. I didn't hear him approach, but I felt him sit beside me. You remember the night I found you? He asked. I remember the cold, I said softly, and your voice. He was quiet for a long time. I meant what I said. He told me, you'll never be alone again. I turned to him, and for the first time in my entire existence, I believed it. This world might burn again. The stars might fall, but whatever came next, we would face it together. And I, once bare, once broken, once lost, I was home.